Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we have just seen The Darkest Minds, which we mentioned on the podcast the other day because we were looking at what else was at the cinema playing against Unfriended 2.
Yes.
And it came up as something which I only suspected was a sort of teenage superhero thing.
I know, and as soon as you said teenage superhero, I thought we must go. Yeah. I love teenage superhero films.
And, you know, it was pretty much what I expected, I suppose. I mean, it's basically X-Men, but done as like a young adult novel.
To be honest, I think it's better than that. Like, I mean, the young adult novel, definitely. I love that about the film. I also loved that it's a teen girls adult novel, so to speak. Yeah, that it's kind of done from a teen black girl's point of view, actually. So I thought that was all rather wonderful and unexpected. I had no expectations of it at all.
Sure.
And I was really delighted by
it. So let's just quickly say what it's about. All the kids in America start developing superpowers at very young ages, and it becomes this kind of nationwide crisis. A lot of the kids died. So I think it's like 90% of the kids are said to have died doing this. But those who survive, it's kind of an illness, and those who survive it develop these powers, and they go into one of 5 categories. They're categorized by the government: green, blue, yellow, orange, red. And the green ones are smart. The blue ones have sort of can move. The blue ones can do electricity. The yellow ones can do telekinesis or something like that. So they all have different categories of powers, and orange and red are the most dangerous. And these kids are rounded up and put into camps. I don't know kind of exactly when this film was made, but the parallels of some of the imagery to what's been going on in recent months with ICE in America.
Yes.
Kids being separated from their parents forcibly and put into these camps is... it's a general kind of similarity, but it is a similarity nonetheless, and it's quite uncomfortable. It's quite harsh to see.
Actually, I you know, when I saw it, it really, because you know, there's a whole argument by people like David Boreal that you shouldn't read films sociologically. Like, you know, what is this film telling us about American society at the moment? You shouldn't do that because really, kind of, if you look at another film, it's telling you something different. So, you know, how can you generalize? But I find it very difficult to not do that when you see a film like this one. You know, it was almost the first thing that came to my mind. And not only about ICE, actually, but more generally. Yeah, kind of.
Generally in history about sort of tyrannical regimes separating and rounding people up. And
that's right. You know, and separating families and separating children and people, you know, killing people off because... I think to say, why are we getting so much of this imagery at this historical moment, right, in cinema, is kind of like a legitimate question because you are seeing it kind of, you know, appearing in various ways. And this was very blatant because it was almost at the heart of the film, really. You know?
Yeah, and there's also an element of not only rounding people up, but also segregating them by categorizing them. You know, right. There's like, in this, it's not so much pejorative in this, they're separated by their powers.
Yes.
But the way that they're given colours is not a million miles from kind of pink triangles and yellow stars.
Yes.
From the Nazis.
That's right.
Anyway, that's the opening to the film, and then this girl, she's separated from her parents. She grows up. She manages. She's an orange, so she's the top level, the most lethal. But she manages to keep herself safe. She has kind of she has telepathic powers that help her sort of pretend that she's a green. So she's benign. One thing leads to another. She's broken out, and then she kind of rejoins the world, or what's left of the world. When now she's 16 years old, meets a gang of other kids who are also out in the world trying to survive.
Yes.
And they basically try and make their way through the world. And there's the promise of maybe a place where kids can be safe, which I think is that's something you see quite a lot.
It's like the promised land, the camp which is all children with powers who have found a haven from this oppressive regime.
Yeah, that's something that you see a fair bit in narratives of this sort of.
That's
ilk.
right.
So yeah, that's the setup. I mean, that's probably the first act.
Yes.
So I guess spoilers from here on. I found the film interesting for the most part, but I also found it quite dull at times. You?
No, I didn't find it dull. I mean, I thought there were moments. I can understand why, the reviews haven't been great. So, I think there are kind of moments that are treated a bit predictably. Particularly the love scenes, I think, were all a bit cliche. Though I really like them anyway. And I think there's something that on the one hand is very conventional in the film. So, kind of these tropes of the teen film are kind of quite conventional. And on the other hand, there's something quite radical about it as well, I think. I.e., it's a film directed by a woman with a black girl's experience and point of view being central to it, right? So even the love story is being told through her point of view, which is kind of, I think, it's not unique, but it's rare enough in cinema to be remarked upon. To be remarked upon. That's right.
Yeah, I suppose so.
And also, kind of the treatment of the love interest. And let me just find his name. It's Harry. Is it Dickinson? I think
Harris Dickinson.
Harris Dickinson.
I don't know.
He was absolutely brilliant in a film called Beach Rats. Which is about a young gay man coming out and kind of meeting people through apps and so on, but having like this whole secret life and being very kind of tortured. So, and I thought he was very charismatic, but he was the love interest, really. It was like, and in a way the film doesn't objectify as it does some, like he never takes his shirt off or anything like that. But on the other hand, the film pays attention to the way he looks, the way he acts, what he says, as if it's all, from the girl's point of view on the boy. I thought that was kind of different and interesting. Yeah, for those reasons. I mean, they're not major differences. They're not kind of, huge things. I mean, in many ways, this is a teen film about teens with superpowers who do like kind of extraordinary things, and part of the pleasure is kind of in watching, the superpowers kind of, unfold in action sequences. Though I think narratively it is predictable. I mean, for example, we knew who the villain was going to be immediately, right? Like,
as soon as you see that there's this thing about the president's son, and how he was the first to be cured, and then you find out that he wasn't.
Yes.
And he's the one running this camp that they eventually managed to get to, this haven.
Not only that, but he's imprisoned his dad, so he is de facto the president of the United States.
Yeah, but you don't know that when you meet him.
No.
The moment that you meet him, I turned to you. He that's right. He meets the four characters that you've been following. These four kids who managed to get their way there, and he says something. He knows something about each of them, and I'm thinking, how does he know this stuff?
Yes.
And so that's the one I turned to you, and I said, "This. I'm very suspicious of this motherfucker."
Yes.
But we knew exactly what was going to happen. I said they're rounding up the kids to kill them all, and he's working with his dad. Which wasn't quite true because he's imprisoned his dad. Nonetheless, he's the baddie.
I want to talk a little bit about the film's imagery because, to me, it's kind of, you see a lot of images that are very resonant with kind of, a view of America in decline, right? So you see like empty malls, houses destroyed where no one lives in them, petrol stations,
ghost towns,
ghost towns, water that is undrinkable, right? So it's
the film doesn't have the apocalyptic tone that suggests, but it is nonetheless. That's the setting.
Yeah,
quite interesting. Like there's a kind of hopeful tone in a way. Like these kids are hopeful and they're making their way through, but the setting is apocalyptic.
What I want to draw attention to is that in fact, the film is not apocalyptic. So, you know, what these images do is they normalize it. That's just the way the world is, in a way that is, you know, the film expects it to be recognizable to people, right? That's the world. So, you know, I mean, it does have an apocalyptic dimension in the sense that,
I mean, all these kids are dead and society's broken down.
And the question that's not asked is, what happens to a world that doesn't permit children, that has no children, right? So there's an apocalyptic dimension to that. But what I was interested in is that the way that all of this imagery, which is imagery of current America in decline, normalizes the film so that, you know, what could have been pushed towards an apocalyptic edge, in fact, just becomes kind of normalized. It's just the world.
Yeah, it's not that alien, a lot of the imagery.
Yes.
You know, you do see ghost towns, and you do see strip malls that have been abandoned and things like that.
Yes.
And that's what this film shows.
Yes.
So although it's in the context of a world that is broken down more than ours has, it's not that different.
Yes. I mean, it's like that wonderful film, well, I thought it was wonderful. I don't remember if you thought it was as wonderful.
The Florida Project.
The Florida Project.
I didn't like it as much as you did.
Yes. You know, so kind of, you know, a lot of those places are like in this movie, you know, but with more sunshine.
Well, that's definitely what made me think of the young adult thing. Is it's just, as much as possible, they've shot it during sunsets.
Yes.
You know, there's just like that low sun that casts sort of harsh shadows and beautiful orange light, and it's all over the fucking film. Like, it actually got quite boring. I started to find that really bland, and that's when I started to think, this is a young adult thing. And then it was no surprise when I came to the credits and I found out based on the novel by such and such, and it's based on a young adult novel.
It is, and I think that merits, you know, some discussion, because the central theme of the film, or let me correct it. What I think is the central theme, you might think it's something different. So this girl has special powers, and one of the powers that she has, she can get into people's minds. She can get them to do what she wants. And one of the things that she can do is erase people's memories. And one of the things that she did initially by accident is that she erased her own existence in the minds of her parents.
Not by accident. She said that she did it on purpose, but she didn't know what she was doing really, and had she been a bit more mature, she was 10 years old, had she been more mature, she wouldn't have done that.
Right.
But she did it to protect them.
That's right. Which I think is a very resonant theme, you know, both with young girls and kind of, you know, with young gay men, yeah? This idea that in order to fit into the world, to make things comfortable for others, right, that you have to erase yourself, that there are these patterns that, you know, you have to fit, or you have to be. So this notion of like the erasure or the encasing, or, you know, the limiting of self to please others, or to you know, to behave in ways that others find acceptable in order to be in their life, which is kind of so you know, there's quite a radical punishment attached to it. The idea is that if you don't go through this process of self-erasure, that actually you won't have a place in the family, right? So, you know, the idea here is, you know, so you remove your place from the family, and then you end up kind of both erasing yourself and not having a place in the family. You know, so I think kind of the film, that's a really interesting idea in the film, the sense that, you know, you see her visually, she just disappears, right? She dissolves.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of, you know, a really resonant theme, really.
Yeah, and desperately tragic, and it happens again at the end. It's repeated. So you see her, dissolve from. It's done through shots that you've already seen. So her in bed with her mum, or her, sort of getting the present from her dad and whatever. And you see these shots again in flashback, and you see her dissolving within them, literally, and she's no longer there in the shot. And then it happens again at the end of the film, because to protect her boyfriend, who's become a boyfriend by this point, the guy that she loves, she has to erase herself from his memory.
That's right.
And it's the most tragic thing. I mean, it was awful. I didn't want to see it, and in a way, I wish it had been a little. Despite the fact it was so tragic, I somehow wanted it to be better still. Like, I didn't feel like it didn't have to happen. I mean, obviously it's a film in which people have powers, so you can't feel like, well, you can write anything you want in a way. It wasn't that. It was just that it didn't feel, maybe it didn't feel built up enough somehow. Or...
I know what you mean. I mean, I thought, because you see, I loved it, and you know, it's very melodramatic, right? Because she's making this huge sacrifice for his own good, but he'll never know, right? Yeah, so it's, in a way, it
feels like it should be more melodramatic. It feels like it should be a bigger moment.
I wanted all the bells and whistles, you know. I wanted like a cirque to, you know, for the music to swell and the leaves to, to blow, right?
Like, I don't want it to be kind of over the top. I don't want it to be showy, but I wanted it to. It's played with a real kind of almost like a low level of drama.
Yes,
and it doesn't feel like it sells it enough.
Yes,
I wanted more from that, but nonetheless, it was really hard to watch.
Yes,
that she had to do that.
Yes, I kind of I felt so you know, my baseline point on it is that I liked it very much, though I also think it's not really as good as it could have been.
No, I don't think it's got enough charm.
Yeah,
there are montages as well where they go to the strip mall, for instance, not the strip mall, but the mall, where it's abandoned, and they're picking out clothes and things.
Yes.
And it's this moment of sort of freedom and liberation that they get to enjoy, and there's a song going on, and you feel like there should be more fun than it is.
Actually,
I
was very fascinated by finding out that the director, Jennifer Hugh Nelson, worked as a storyboard artist for many, many years. She was a storyboard artist, you know, before she was a director. And you think, how could a storyboard artist design a sequence as unshowy and inelegant and visually unspectacular as the scene in the mall?
Yeah, I agree.
You know,
it feels like it's got all the ingredients and just fails to make anything out of them.
Yeah, and kind of it wasn't pulled together.
And
really.
it's not the only time, but which is a shame. And there's not enough charm in the film. But I don't think it's a fault of the actors, who I think are all good.
I think they're all good. I think they also could have been better.
I think they could have been better used somehow. I think they could have been given more to do in a way.
And some of the things that they were given to do, I think were very dodgy. So, for example, I was very conscious through all of the time that they were in the camp, that Ruby, the young heroine, was wearing heels. And you just think, who made that choice to wear, you know, high-heeled boots in the fucking forest when you're escaping, you know, from a totalitarian government, right? Like, yeah. It just...
I didn't notice, to be fair.
Well, it's just one of those things, right? Like, that you... And I think it's kind of relevant, because if you let that kind of thing go by, it's just indicative of a kind of laxness and, you know...
Yeah, I guess it feels like something's gone by, but the film pays so much attention to those sort of things. I mean, is it a decision? I don't know, because the film is conversant with with things like kind of white male hegemony and Me Too and stuff like this. I mean, you have near a rape scene in the film with the guy who's in power taking advantage of Ruby.
Oh no, the film is, don't get me wrong, the film is very clearly feminist and also girly, right? Like, in the best way. You know, kind of the bonding of the younger girl and the older girl together, the trying on outfits, and the importance, you know, that having another woman around means to the young girl. You know, those are all kind of very deliberately kind of dramatized, right? But you know, but this thing about high heels, it's like, what kind of a heroine do you want, right? Yeah, because, you know, she is meant to be like an action person. I mean, most of her powers are mental, right? But nonetheless, you know, she is in the forest. You know, so what do the high heels signify? I mean, Jennifer Lawrence doesn't wear high heels in The Hunger Games, right? Like, it's just... I kind of...
But were they high heels, or were they just kind of boots with a heel? I don't know.
They were like a 3-inch heel on a boot.
Okay.
Right? Like, you know, they were clearly a heel.
All right, I'm gonna go. I'm just... if she'd been wearing stilettos, I think I would have noticed.
It could have been simply that the hero's so tall in comparison that maybe, you know, it could have been something as simple as that. But I think if that's the case, then there are better ways to resolve that kind of problem.
Yeah, sure.
You know, because it kind of undermines the figure, it kind of undermines the character, I think, a little bit.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. It's funny what you were saying about. It was interesting what you were saying about the image and the idea of the girl making herself, erasing herself, because I think it reminds me of The Incredibles, where the daughter in The Incredibles is that she's probably 16 as well, also, and her power is invisibility, and again that's all about hiding yourself.
Yes.
And of course in the Incredibles it's rendered useful, and in this it's rendered sort of necessary and tragic. But I think I don't think it's an accident. There's a commonality between the two. This idea of teenage girls being made invisible. That kind of. I think on one hand it kind of reflects a feeling that maybe you want to be like, you don't want to, like you're nervous about yourself and you don't want to be seen maybe, but also the idea that society would rather not see you maybe.
Well, it's a theme that's very deliberately worked through in the film. So, right, if you remember, first she erases herself from her parents, right? Then she's put in this camp where she actually has to hide who she is in order to survive, right? Which is another form of.
Well, that's it. Like she is the most powerful one there, and that you could say it's a kind of, it's like when girls are sort of precocious and smart and whatever they might be, and are encouraged to not express that.
That's right. But so there's a thing that she has to very consciously erase herself at camp in order to survive. And then there's a moment of liberation where she finally decides to wear that red dress, right? And that's kind of like a coming out into herself with this group of people, right? And I think so I think this theme is something that you could see threaded through and worked through and and kind of highlighted, which I thought was very nice. I like that.
Yeah, I agree. Actually. I mean, you pointed out an awful lot of stuff. I think actually it's film. I didn't think it was a bad film at all, but I felt it was bland, and I think that is a fair criticism. I think it is bland, but clearly there is more depth than I was seeing, because I wasn't really turned on by any of that. But you're right. What I was kind of noticing more, particularly when they got to the camp, I was noticing the things about segregation and about the kind of parallels of racism and that sort of thing. Which again, I mean, that's really similar to the X-Men stories, which are all about that. There's that great bit where they get to the camp, the Haven, and the guy who sort of introduces them there says, "There's no segregation here," because in the government-run camp where she was kept for 6 years, they are literally segregated by colour. And in this camp, everyone's intermingled and everyone's moving around together. And the guy says, "There's no segregation here. We respect each other's differences, but we're all the same." Which is just like this sentence that sums up the perfect view of what humanity could be.
Yes.
Respecting each other's differences, but treating everyone equally.
Yes. I want to highlight also, in relation to, this thing about, being a teenage girl and, also the way that the sex is treated, right? So she's in love, he's in love with her, but they can't have sex. They can't touch, right?
Yeah, because when she touches him, she gets into his head. She can't control her power.
That's right. And then actually part of learning to control her power is, this letting this guy into her head, who in fact does teach her a few things.
The president's son.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, she wakes up and he's on top of her, raping her, right? So I think there are kind of like interesting attitudes kind of being metaphorically expressed about, sexuality and teen sexuality and love and, It's a film that's kind of very scared of touching.
Yeah, it's terribly chaste, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a 12A.
Yes.
You feel like, I mean,
you think it would go well with like Christian groups? It's a little bit, it's a little bit like Twilight.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the sense that like, you know, here this couple madly in love, but actually because of, you know, of who he is and who she is, you know, they can't touch in case they get out of control. I mean, that is like a metaphor for, you know, the purity movement or something. And this is not quite like that, though it has a soupçon of that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, certainly she's terrified of touching him because she can't control her powers, but also because like it would kind of thrust them into such a level of intimacy that they don't want or that she's not ready for. Because then touching him means seeing his past, getting into his head unstoppably.
Yes.
And that's like, so just like the lightest brush of skin on skin brings out this entire sort of connection between them that they wouldn't be able. There would be way too much.
I was a bit disappointed in how they handled the last set piece as well, right? Because, you know, here she is, Ruby. She's the star. Yeah, she's the most powerful person of them all. It's true that her powers are kind of internal, right? But so are Jean Grey's in the X-Men or something, right? There's a way that the film could have been dazzling about externalizing that and showing us this really, you know, powerful young girl in action, right? Which it really backs down from. And I thought the film also missed an opportunity in showing the couple in action together. So, you know, something that would have made the subsequent loss, you know, all the more poignant, right? So I think kind of those things were really...
the film is visually completely unspectacular.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a memorable image. You know, I mean, the best images are those which you've seen in countless other films, really. Things of, like, the kids kind of just walking down the streets, in, like, the countryside at sort of dusk. Beautiful, but not special.
No. And actually, I think the film also missed moments. So, you know, there's that lovely moment where he asks her to dance, and she's shy. And because he's got these powers, he just kind of twirls his finger, and she comes floating on to dance with him. I mean, that could have been so beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, you could have made that visually magic and emotionally, like...
The idea was lovely, but it could have been more.
Yeah, the idea was lovely. The execution was banal, right? So...
Although, actually, I'll go back slightly. There are memorable images in what we've discussed already about Ruby erasing herself from memories.
Yes.
Those are great images, actually. I think those images really work, and they are quite special in this.
Yes. It's an odd film because, you know, in so many ways, I liked it better than the Hunger Games and the Divergent series, but it just lacks the gloss and the excitement of those films, you know. And actually, also obviously, both Jennifer Lawrence and is it Shailene Woodley?
I don't know who's in.
Divergent. You know, they're...
Oh, is it Shailene Woodley?
Shailene Woodley, yeah.
Okay.
You know, they kind of ground their characters in, you know, an emotional kind of rawness that you can connect with and understand that I think is not quite the case in this film.
I felt really bad for the young girl who plays the young 10-year-old Ruby.
Yes.
In this, because I think
she was lovely, though.
She was lovely, and I think she does a really good job. And she gets the whole opening of the film, which is where this this crisis strikes America, and kids are dying all over the place, and it's her 10th birthday, and her parents are really worried about her, and she's going, "You don't have to worry." And then, you know, it hits, and her powers develop all of a sudden, and then in this kind of mass confusion. You know, she goes to see her mum. Her mum doesn't know who she is. You don't know at that point it's because she's erased herself. It's very confusing. You're just as confused as the young Ruby is. And she's taken by the CDC, and she's taken to this camp, and then she gets stuck in there, and she nearly killed by a doctor who discovers she's an orange. She manages to protect herself. She gets this whole opening. I mean, that's all before the title comes up. And then once the title comes up, then you go to 6 years later, and it's a 16-year-old Ruby.
Yeah.
and I just felt so bad for the girl, that she didn't get the rest of the film as well because she was so good and she earned it. I thought,
Well, I think the actress who plays Ruby, Amanda Sternberg, is also very good.
Yeah, she is.
But the person I felt sorry for is Maya Sek, who plays Zhu.
Czech.
Okay.
Czech. Well, that's how you say Petr Cech's name.
Okay, so Czech. Maya Czech. I felt sorry for her because there were entire shots where they're meant to be a gang of 4, and I thought this was also kind of a bit typical of the carelessness of the filmmakers. So you have a cast of 4, and you put this 3-foot little girl in the back, right, in front of this 6-foot tall hero, so you just don't see her. And I thought, that's terrible. They could have put her in front.
Yeah, and she has no dialogue at all.
Yeah,
and I thought there is something uncomfortable about the idea of the silent sort of Oriental girl who's sort of mysterious and has this power. She wears marigolds because she can't. Yeah. It really feels like that, and it feels very uncomfortable.
Yes,
I didn't like it. And to be fair, when she has stuff to do and she's on camera, she's fantastic. I really liked her, and her connection with Amanda Sternberg is great.
Yes.
The
director is South Korean, I understand. So, I
feel like there should have been an awareness of.
Anyway, it was I'm not. I don't want to extrapolate too much, but certainly visually, in a lot of the shots where the 4 of them were meant to be together, I thought there was an unkindness to the young girl. Because it just. The composition of the shots, the placing of the people within the shot rendered her invisible in ways that were completely unnecessary.
Yeah, and you're right. That's just carelessness.
Yeah.
Lydia Jewett is the name of the girl who plays young Ruby in the opening scene.
Okay, she was lovely.
She's great. I thought that was good. I felt bad for her.
So, shall we wrap up?
Yeah. Anything else to say?
No, I mean, I would urge people to see it, though maybe,
Well, kind of guardedly, but there are things in there. Well, I mean, what I would say is that I found it pretty bland, although I kind of wanted to know what would happen, and that opening is fantastic. And then when the government evil comes in back towards the end as well, and then leads up to that tragic ending, I think that's really good. In between, I found very bland, but clearly. There is a way of watching these films. It's searching for sort of visual metaphor and things that I was just not in tune with, because you brought up an awful lot of stuff that I hadn't thought about at all, which is clearly being dealt with by the film.
Yes. Well, my view on all of this is the film is not great, but actually I think it is kind of like a fascinating exercise. And also, people are moaning and moaning and moaning about there's not enough women in film, and there's not enough female directors, and women don't get the roles, and black people don't get the roles. Well, here's a film directed by a woman about a young heroine, and the young heroine is black. And actually, it's one of those films that demonstrates, I think, absolutely, that women making film makes a difference. You see different things, and you see them in slightly different ways. And actually, this is a film in which you can actually point to quite a lot of those ways. And I think it's, very much worth seeing for that. I can't think of another,
Since Twilight.
But if you remember with Twilight, is Catherine Hardwicke did such a great job on the first one, and then they got all these guys to do the sequels for more, for more. They didn't trust the series to the person who'd made it successful. It was an outrage, I thought. So it's a women filmmaker directing a story with a central female character, and the central female character is black. There's all kinds of interesting things, I think, that result from that, and it's worth seeing for those reasons, I think.
Yeah.
Merci beaucoup. We are eavesdropping at the movies. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, SoundCloud, and iTunes.
Yeah, well done.
And I haven't lost my marbles yet.
Yeah. Slowly, they're slowly going. They're slowly being erased.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.